Most of punishment in U.S. prisons due to lack of support and resources. Jumping then final oral presentation. Methods of punishment. Whether you have a utilitarian point of view, deontology point of view, or a peacemaking point of view, there's a method of punishment for all of them. These can range from attempting to prevent the crime from ever happening to having an eye for an eye standpoint. The following slides cover each of the main 4 types of punishment in today's society. Deterrence. Motivation for the 3 strikes law and the stop and frisk. The 3 strikes law is if you get stopped and arrested for the same 2 offenses, and then the 3rd time you will go to jail. And stop and frisk is if an officer has reasonable suspicion that you are doing something illegal, they can stop you on the street and frisk you. General and specific deterrence, a broader target versus a specific target to deter crime from happening. The idea that the potential offender will weigh the benefits and consequences of the crime versus the potential outcome. Rehabilitation, attempt to solve the problem at the root and with treatment and therapy, generally done in place of incarceration, forcing the offender into treatment due to the severe inability to competently stand trial for their crimes, also known as innocent by reason of insanity, in places where that is applicable, may be required as part of a plea bargain in conjunction with incarceration, has questionable effectiveness, as we will see later. Incapacitation is the age-old incarceration in a prison to get a dangerous person off the streets. It goes along with retribution in that an offender must be properly punished for their crimes to get justice. And it is the final outcome of the 3 strikes law, as mentioned. Brings forth the replacement effect of where once someone goes to jail, another steps up to take their place, committing the crime that they first wouldn't have. Retribution, based on the idea that people who break the law deserve to be punished, often leads to discrepancies in sentencing durations based on circumstances of similar crimes being committed. Often a topic brought up in racially motivated cases, like a person of minority may get a harsher sentence if the victim was of a different race. A lot of people will consider it a retribution of justice. They think that they're just getting payback, essentially. Unintended consequences of punishment. Mental health. Mental health and substance abuse do not get properly treated in prison, and resources are even less so available upon release. Prisons are essentially a mental health hospital, however, they are not equipped or staffed for this. This is not on purpose, it's just kind of how it happened to go, as the vast majority of people who end up in prison have mental health issues, which is why they commit the crimes. Instead of treatment for the severe illness, they often get punished further, such as isolation, making the illness worse. An average of 60% of inmates have a mental health issue. Even if an offender did not enter jail with a mental illness, does not mean one won't develop while incarcerated. Unintended consequences of punishment, prison corruption. Considered one of the greatest threats to the criminal justice system. Defeats any purpose of punishment for the offenders and puts those who want to do better at risk. Meaning, people who are in jail for a one-time offense and they really don't want to be there. Prison corruption and the potential of contraband being brought into prisons or just negative experiences in prison can lead people who want to do better. Maybe they just get to a point where they can't cope anymore and those drugs are looking awfully nice to get them out of their mindset, or the way that they get treated in prison by the correctional officers ends up putting them in a place where they, you know, may want to act out. The power of correctional officers over the inmates can severely put the inmates' rights in jeopardy. Inmates already have a fewer amount of rights, but that doesn't mean that they lose everything. They're expected to have the absolute minimum, at least minimum amount of rights, meaning a solid clean place of living, food every day, and just kind of general base respect. And many times they may not get that with police or prison corruption. If contraband is being brought into the prison, it opens the door to violence and additional time being added to sentences. It is a well-known fact that inmates will be abused while in prison, yet nothing is actively being done to fix this. Unintended consequences of punishment, family, traditions. Children of offenders are more likely to commit crime later in life. When a sole parent goes into prison, the child will most likely be placed into foster care or adopted out, leading to a life of potential mental health issues. Lack of evident support from a parent in prison creates a large child support bill that adds up while incarcerated, meaning they are expected to pay that bill when they get out. And, as later in this, if they don't have those resources, if they don't have that money, they don't have that job, then how are they expected to pay this? And then at that point, they are also a felon, and that can be used against them. Or, maybe not a felon, but they are a criminal, and that can be used against them in court to not ever see their kids again. In lesser well-off communities, parents battle teaching their children respect for the law and keeping them out of trouble. So they're going to be getting into a lot more criminal activity because that's what the majority of those communities are made up of these people who know someone or have family that's in jail, and that's all they've ever known. So maybe they're going to have less of a respect for law enforcement. So to be able to make sure that they stay out of jail, stay out of crime, and respect law enforcement when they do see them, and to not have that negative view, it can be very difficult. Lack of resources for release. Excessive caseloads for probation and parole officers do not allow for the proper time and energy to be put into monitoring and assigning treatments, therapy, job opportunities, or housing. A lot of places, and Alaska is a little bit special because we don't have that big of a population. A lot of other places have way too many people going in and out of jail that they just simply don't have enough. It's like having enough police officers. If we don't have enough probation and parole officers to monitor each and every single one of them and to do and to follow up on every little aspect that they need to get these offenders on track and to be successfully reintegrated to society, then no one's going to be there to help them to get on their feet, and they're just expected to fail. Most offenders will be out of a job, no transportation, no solid home, therefore leading to stressors that may pave the way back to criminal activity. Some jails and prisons may offer certain resources like halfway homes where they can maybe start to get a house or a job um, while still spending part of their time in prison, but not all of them. Community support is non-existent because of the stigma of an ex-con, um, leading to difficulties in getting a job or a home. You know, most places, even if they don't really do a background check, they will probably ask on your application if you have a criminal record. And a lot of people, regardless of what that crime was, aren't going to want to hire someone with a criminal record. As someone who did criminal background checks for the state for 4 years, it's really difficult. And to see these people that just really want to do this one specific job and be in this specific job field, but they have something on their record that happened, 20 years ago or more, but it's a permanent barrier on them. They have to go through a lot of hoops to try and make sure to try and get that job, and there's still no guarantee. Recidivism, or recommitting a crime. Mental health and recidivism are commonly linked, expanding the idea that offenders are not getting the proper help they need outside of prison. There are many factors that contribute to recidivism, including social status, age, race, and prior offenses. Sentencing young offenders to incarceration can have worse effects on the individual due to exposure to the nature of prison. Yes, prison can help kids to be like, hey, I don't want to do this again. This isn't a good idea. I don't want to come back. But it can also really, just like with the older prisoners, they can go into jail with all the best intentions to do better and to never be in that situation again. But just the certain way that prisons are, even for juveniles, it might just change them in a very negative way that we don't want. But what are the positives? Prison offers rehabilitation efforts to those who clearly need it. It does. It, that's what it's for in everyone's mind. It's for rehabilitation, but it just doesn't really happen that way. Punishment provides justice for the victims of the crime. It does, to a point, but everyone's idea of justice is going to be very skewed. It removes the worst of the worst off of the streets, away from society. Yes, it does. But as prior discussed, there's always someone there to replace that person once they're taken off the streets and commit the crime that they would have been committing. So, like, one of the examples that I kept coming up with or finding was gangs. If one person gets arrested in a gang, there's still numerous other people there to take their place and to continue doing what they were doing, that first person. The entire point to punishment, it holds the offender accountable to their actions. It does. Um, Again, all of these, you take them at face value as positives, or you can look further into it. Conclusion. While there's no clear solution to the failing justice system in America, knowing the causes for it will hopefully help move it in the right direction. Will we ever get ahead of such high prison populations and crime rates? No, we most certainly never will. We are too little, too late. The punishment methods in themselves are not the issue. The issue stands in how the offender is treated while in prison and once released. If the goal is to reintegrate them into society successfully, why are we failing them and letting them drown that easily? In my references.